here is where everything all began. Donkey Kong is an incredibly innovative and fun game from an era littered with carbon copies. More specifically, Donkey Kong is the world's first platformer, and it was a fine starting point. However, there are a few good reasons that this one is at the bottom. Firstly, the concept of a giant ape abducting a pretty girl and fleeing up a building is stolen from the film King Kong. It's parody, of course, but that means the concept isn't as original as it could have been. Lastly, due to the idea of a platform being completely new here, leads to a very severe case of innovation but not perfection. Other arcade games were so overdone that people pretty much mastered the formula by the end of the era. This one, however, simply hasn't aged quite as well due to poor jump arcs and inaccurate hit detection, to name just a couple of faults. Up next on the list is a much newer, much prettier game. I'm not kidding that this game has some of the best video and audio of any game on this list. In addition, it's not afraid to poke fun at itself. In particular, Meowser is freaking hilarious. Mechanically, 3D World did a lot right as well by introducing power-ups for the first time in a long time that were completely original and changed the gameplay in parts. And of course, reintroducing Mario 2's mechanic of multiple playable characters. However, what is wrong with this game is very wrong. Otherwise, it wouldn't be this low on the list. The pacing for this game is broken. In the beginning, it's too easy, but by the time you've reached Special World, you better be a freaking pro. Or at least better than me. This game is on my list of games I will never complete, simply because of how ridiculous it gets and how tedious it is. However, I'm actually okay with that for the most part, because the completion bonus is completely pointless. You get, for clearing the hardest level in any Mario game to date, 5 times, 5 sparkly stars on the game save and a few largely useless stamps. But I should go on before I get any more carried away. Mario Party was one of the most entertaining and frustrating games in the entire franchise. I feel like the best ones fall between 2 and 8, but my footage comes from 3, as it's my personal favorite. Though, you can take your pick. As I said, this game is a lot of fun. That's because it is multiplayer-centric and highly luck-based. It's a good game to play with friends for this exact reason. Also, though I've largely kept quiet about this, I usually have a big problem with games that rely on mini-games. Hastily made, arcade-esque games that are often barely functional. Because they're an artificial way of extending the length and enhancing the difficulty of most games. However, Mario Party makes this work, because most of the mini-games work very well, and you can still win or lose regardless of how well you play them. However, both of these pros are also cons, as sometimes absolutely crazy, quote, luck can completely derail a good game. And while this game is fun with friends, it's also very dangerous to play with them, as the crazy random bits tend to make real people The dark horse of the original trilogy has a ton of innovation, introducing multiple playable characters and a very original gameplay style based off of its original Japanese release of Doki Doki Panic. Speaking of Doki Doki, it is completely unlike any other NES-era Mario title thanks to its throwing mechanic, which lends itself to making the title almost more of an adventure platformer than an action one. Figures that Mario and Zelda 2 would both include some mechanics from the other franchises. However, like with the Party series, Mario 2's positives hold it back. Its gameplay is so different from the original and subsequent Mario games that any skills developed from the other games will not translate. If you want to conquer this game, you will have to be good at Mario 2. You cannot conquer this game based off of Mario 3 skills. Also, there are almost no power-ups and the health upgrade system is very weird. With that said, this game also has a very odd learning curve, especially in the boss battles. Besides actual Mario 2, The Lost Levels, this is the Mario game I have the toughest time with, purely because of this and how different it is. Here it is. After Party, I'm sure most people were waiting for this one. Now you can rest easy that it's here, just outside the top 10. Though, I'm not counting the original, oddly enough. I just don't think it's aged terribly well. Like with Party, this one is great fun with friends, whether you choose to race or battle. Unlike Party, however, it's stuffed to bursting with iconic and striking levels with even more beautiful tracks, especially Rainbow Road. However striking the courses are, there still persists some serious problems. Firstly, the rubber band AI is always frustrating, as it punishes players for being good. But the rubber band AI is nothing compared to the random power-ups, from blue shells trolling the best car, to bananas when in last place, to single green shells when in first. The greatest indictment against this game is how it punishes success. And if not for that, it definitely would have been in the top 10. Speaking of, that's right, a Dark Horse entry starring Luigi just barely worked itself into the top 10. And if you're thinking I broke my rules by putting this here, consider this. Luigi's full name is Luigi Jumpman Mario. And further, Ruigi's Japanese pronunciation comes from the root Rui, which means the same. Luigi Jumpman Mario's full title is then the same as Jumpman Mario. Luigi's Mansion has a lot of the same pros and cons as Donkey Kong, with a few extra pros. But allow me to extrapolate. One of the greatest perks of Luigi's Mansion is that it's a third-person ghost hunter simulator game, something the likes of which is rarely seen. Unlike Donkey Kong, however, this game's atmosphere is absolutely striking, shifting back and forth between intrigue, suspense, and horror. Luigi's Mansion's concept, to nobody's surprise, is ripped from Ghostbusters. Though again, It's parody, so I'm giving it a partial pass. An actual issue I have with this one is its clumsy controls. Innovation rarely equals perfection, and the vaguely Mega Man Legends controls here just feel sloppy. These are some of the only truly bad controls in the series, if you want my opinion. Which, considering you're watching a top 10 on my channel, this greatly holds it back. Luckily though, the gameplay is somewhat slow, so it's not too bad of a strike in this one case. The only real mark against this game is its recycling of numerous assets. I don't like it when game devs do this, as it comes off as lazy. This is the very reason it took me so long to warm up to Majora's Mask. Though, the sheer magnitude of this game's beauty warrants at least a near middle spot on the list. And though it stole a lot from the first game, like its visuals, its music, and its near perfect controls, yes, even the motion-based ones, one big thing it did not steal was Yoshi. The ultimate power-up whose inclusion almost always improves the game immensely.
Space, go into space. Wait, space, space. Wanna go to space? Space, go to space. Yeah, boy. Go into space, go in there. Can't wait.
Simply put, this game's charming. Based very closely off its predecessor, Paper Mario leapfrogs it considerably with its timeless art style and much tighter overworld and combat controls. But the saving grace of the Mario RPGs is and always has been the characters. And this one has some of the best, including Bo and Bombette. That said, this game's story is complete fluff, and the bonus content. Koopa Koot, Chuck Quizmo, and all the absurd number of collectibles that can easily fall down into the code and disappear forever will ruin your experience. The only one worth doing, in my opinion, is Tasty Tea.
4 cup vegetable oil, 4 large eggs, 1 cup semi-sweet chocolate chips, 3/4 cup butter or margarine,
Which is
1
just,
and 2/3 cups granulated sugar, 2 cups
just,
all-purpose flour.
well,
Don't forget garnishes such as fish-shaped crackers, fish-shaped candies, fish-shaped solid
sorry, I'll be right back.
Fish
A beautiful reimagining of classic Mario, which, unfortunately, begat a horrid trend in the franchise. A trend which birthed a string of uninspired games that stole from this title and have all but blotted out originality within the Mario franchise. A lot of people forget that this title wasn't as dull or uninspired as its spawn, however, hosting unique and deep atmosphere, as well as one of the darkest sequences in the history of Mario. Dark themes don't work as well when they feel forced, but Dry Bones Bowser feels like such a natural progression that it doesn't at all seem forced. Don't believe me? Have a look for yourself. popcorn yesterday, you probably expected this one. And it's well deserved. Where Donkey Kong may have birthed the platformer genre, Super Mario perfected it. In its inception, Super Mario boasted the tightest controls and best camera panning in any side-scroller, let alone platformer, to date, and they have aged extremely well. Personally, when it comes to the visuals, I prefer the All-Star art style, but both are so good I can't realistically blame anybody for preferring the look or feel of the original to the All-Star version. There is, however, one issue slightly greater than a nitpick that I have with this title that just barely holds it out of the top 5. The one-way screen panning. This title would have been so much more playable than it is. Which I realize is saying something. If only the screen could pan to the left. I can't tell you how many times I've missed a power-up like a fire flower just because you can't make the screen pan left. I realize that this is mostly due to the console's limitations, but darn it if it isn't frustrating to deal with. We open the top 5 with one which I'm sure is many NES fans' number 1. And I would be lament to not acknowledge that any issues I have with any games on this list from this point on are only nitpicks that don't at all tarnish these games. The first thing to mention here is that Mario 3 went back to its beloved Mario 1 style of being an action platformer, and even corrected that screen panning issue I just mentioned. Which I guess would make the second thing I need to mention. This game has some of the tightest controls of any game in the franchise. For mechanically inclined people, it's no surprise it's number 1 on most people's lists. But me? I'm more about atmosphere and overall substance than controls. Which brings me to Mario Bros. 3 has the second best overall atmosphere of any 2D Mario, especially in the All-Stars pack, where the kings were transformed into not random creatures, but enemies from other games. Now, here's the one minor issue I have with this game, and it's something that I actually like in the game. At the time of inception, map screens showing the feel of each new world were a new and novel idea that efficiently presented the player with what they might expect in each new level. However, in recent years, they've become a lazy method of showing the player bare minimum in terms of atmosphere before diving into each level proper. There would be a time where the level selectors were big, grand, and beautiful levels in their own right. Thanks in part to these overworld maps, the majestic hub world has been all but thrown out. And that is a shame. Spoiler alert, my favorite 2D Mario game is at number 4. Mario World has a lot of the same pros as the previous entry, so I won't harp on the precision controls too long. The controls are very good. However, where Mario 3 fixed the screen panning issue, Mario World truly took advantage of it with the introduction of keys. Yes, keys. Keys that open up alternate paths to secret levels. Because of this mechanic, Mario 2's exploration elements can be added without the player needing to completely relearn mechanics. The multiple secret exits also flow well on Mario World's map screen. Unlike Mario 3's maps, Mario World's overlays and interconnects, creating what I call the primordial hub world. The only real fault I could find with this title is that the meat of the game is just a tad too easy until the difficulty ramps up to ridiculous in Special World. Which On second thought, sounds familiar. Obvious choice is obviously obvious. Obviously. Mario 64 was the first game to bring Nintendo into 3D, and unlike many other early 3D games of that era, Super Mario 64 stands the test of time. Yes, I mean the original, unaltered N64 version, not the modified DS port. Unlike Galaxy 2, Mario 64 is largely free-roaming in such a way that you can collect things out of order and even just relax and explore. Speaking of exploration, to my knowledge, Peach's Castle is the first 3D hub world, and it very may be the absolute best one to date. Mario 64 was the first game in the franchise to jump to 3D. The limited polygons and textures could have crippled this game's atmosphere. But it did anything but, as this was arguably the most striking game in the franchise up to this point, in large part to the music. The one nitpick I have is that a lot of bosses are pretty bland. Of course, omitting that final Bowser battle. This game is surprisingly deep. Despite having that same old Princess Peach kidnapped by Bowser copy-pasted plot. A lot of this depth can be attributed to the new character Rosalina and the Lumas. Rosalina's near disappearance in Galaxy 2 and the beautiful Comet Observatory hub in the original are what shoot this game far ahead of its sequel, in my mind. Let's get this out of the way though. Of all the entries in the top 5, the biggest issue I have is right here. I dislike this game's few minigame-esque bonus stars quite a bit, especially those garbage scowl minigames. These are unnecessary, make the side characters seem ungrateful, and because they don't get the same kind of TLC that something like the platforming and sound design would, they don't play well. Oddly enough though, I don't have any issues with the levels based solely off the motion controls, as they do actually work better than most people give them credit. It's mostly just those 2 garbage cleaning mini-games. About those motion controls though, they work, and they work exceptionally well when in the vein of the standard game. The spin jump is a fantastic, if game-breaking, addition to Mario's established moveset. Also, collecting Compyco is charming, and I happen to have some Kyoto Compyco here. Real Starbits. Only Nintendo could take something as silly as Mario in and turn it into something absolutely beautiful. The elephant in the room. Super Mario Galaxy is visually and audibly the most beautiful Mario game. Period. Though it is trumped in overall atmosphere by one title. But before we get to that one title, I have a few honorable and not so honorable mentions. While the verdict is that this game is good, I've never played it, so it can't be on the list. Sorry. I'm not really alone on this. Am I? Okay, then I guess I am alone. But let me explain myself here. I'm of the opinion that this game tries just a little too hard to be dark. That, the let's call them questionable partners, and the pointless QTE events based off the audience, and I just couldn't justify it. That said, this game is still very good, and you can consider it my honorary number 16. I know I won't be making any friends here, but I don't like this game. Fans completely ignore the fact that it's as glitchy as Sonic 06 and has a worse camera than Mario 64. The fluted gimmick does not erase these issues, but nostalgia-blind fans have willfully ignored them. Not to mention quick, before I get to my number 1, I just want to describe a game for you guys. An iconic hero is beset by an unknown assailant on his way to find something important to him. Wielding godlike power, before being separated, he then follows a fairy into an entirely new world. A world that he soon learns is beset by the same godlike power that separated him from his companion. He is painfully aware that this world is on borrowed time to acquire new power to foil the new villain, who isn't so bad deep down, but is in fact being used by the power he pretends to wield. Put your hands up if you thought I was talking about Majora's Mask. Put them down, because I was actually talking about a lot of people gripe when a game gives them something they didn't expect, or more accurately, something they didn't want. Super Paper does just that. It provides the gamer with an unprecedented and incredibly deep story, something that in every other Mario game is either secondary or non-existent. But before I spoil anything big, did you know that I can relate this game to more than just Majora's Mask? Firstly, Toby Fox has stated that Dr. Alphys was inspired by one of the monsters in this game by the name of Francis. They are both borderline hikikomori otaku, or nearly shut-in nerds. Both characters are very similar, with the obvious distinction being their gender. Similarities even going so far as them both being reptiles, and both going on sham dates with the player. But then, while I was getting footage for this list, this happened. Seem familiar? Let's overlay that track with a more familiar image then. I could be wrong, but it seems like that this game succeeded Majora and inspired, at least in part, both Five Nights at Freddy's and Undertale. If you don't live under a rock, you have in all likelihood this game to thank for a game you recently played. Up next on the chopping block, this game has perfect controls. Glad we could get that out of the way. That means we can get to the originality of this game's genre-melting gameplay. It is rare to see so many styles of gameplay mesh together so well, and have each be so polished. If I were to say Super Paper Mario's full genre, I'd say it's an action platformer RPG shmup adventure 2.5D game. Keep in mind the controls are absolutely perfect. At last, a jack of all trades that's also a master of all. I guess I can't put it off anymore. This is your last warning. I will be spoiling several key story moments from this point on. If you haven't played the game for yourself yet, you may want to stop watching. And I've been ignored. Don't say I didn't warn you. This game's story is told piece by piece in little flashback segments at the end of each chapter. The story tells of a young man named Blumiere falling in love with a young lady named Timpani. And when it comes to true love stories, I'm as soft as, well...
Here he comes.
Yeah. But their story is at least partially romantic in that their love is taboo. Blumiere is from the tribe of Darkness, a group who abuse dark magic to warp the world around them. When Blumiere's father gets wind of his son's deeds and plans, he uses that very magic to banish Timpani to the gap between dimensions, to wander for all time, losing more and more of herself as time passes. Blumiere didn't take this well, and he took up the mantle of Count Bleck, chosen wielder of his people's most powerful relic, the Dark Prognosticus, an ancient book of prophecies that foretell of great doom. More specifically, the creation of the Chaos Heart and the Void, which will erase all of time and space. If there isn't a world where they can be together, he vows, then there shouldn't be any worlds at all. This story has plenty of...
What's up?
Of course, but it also has some... and even plenty of... This, in addition to everything else, assured its spot at number 1. If you enjoyed this top 15, please consider liking the video and maybe even subscribing. Disagree? Leave your personal favorites down below. Or maybe you want to see a specific list from me in the future. I am taking suggestions. Until next time, Until next time, stay enlightened.